How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tzadi Gimel, Daf 93 of Masechta Chullin. Friends, let me tell you, Daf 93 is a piece of work. A piece of God's work, a piece of great work, but a piece of work nonetheless. Sheesh. Yeah. What can I tell you about Daf 93? There's just like a lot of stuff on Daf 93. Like, as I was learning Daf 93, I realized like, oh, interesting. This is Daf 93. Like when we were doing a lot of the Elu Trapis stuff and a lot of the stuff earlier on in the Masechta, like we haven't really been using the Hillel book in a while so much. We've had a big Hillel book gap, which I think was kind of nice because today's the Hillel book day. There's gonna be a lot of slides today, and it's also Erev Shabbos. It's not a great day for like such an intense stuff for me, but I'll upon him. I'm running a little bit behind. But we haven't really had like Hillel book dafs in a while. And today's a big Hillel book daf. And as I was learning the daf, I realized like, oh, right. Like earlier in the Masechta, there would be certain topics that I'd be like, oh yeah, that's on daf 93. And then I realized like, oh, that's today. All that stuff that's like daf 93, that's today's daf. Anyways, so today's daf, there's just like, I don't even know really what to say about it. There's just like lots of stuff about chaylev, about we even get into like salting meat a little bit and like getting rid of blood and blood vessels and there's like a lot of stuff on today's daf. So there's going to be a bunch of slides to look at, and just like we're going to be going from like topic to topic kind of throughout the daf. I hope it's going to be great. Come join me. Let's have a great time studying Daf Tzadi Gimel. No, it's going to be great. So I would say this is a huge daf, not in size, but like it's a momentous daf. Again, as I said, so many things in the Hillel book were like referencing this one daf because there's like a lot of different topics. Every 3 lines is like another topic, which makes it kind of hard, but also like makes it kind of important, you know. So, anyways, come join me. Let's have a great time studying Daf Tzadi Gimel, Daf 93 of Masechta Chullin. Hi, friends. We begin on Daf Tzadi Beis Amud Beis. We have a little bit of work to do on Daf Tzadi Beis Amud Beis because once we get the ball rolling today, like it's gonna roll into Daf Tzadi Gimel. So I kind of stopped right where the snowball starts snowballing. So it says the Gemara on Daf Tzadi Beis Amud Beis about 15 or 20 lines from the bottom. It says Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta Amar Rav. Got it? Good. Lo aser Torah ela knuknis shabo. So according to Rav, essentially, the Giran, what's aser midoraisa? By the Gid Anoshe, the knuknis. What are the knuknis? The knuknis, I think did we talk about the knuknis yesterday? Yeah, I think we did. That in the Gid Anoshe, there's that long nerve, but also, maybe I should have had a slide of the Gid Anoshe. I don't have one. I think it's okay. We've seen it before. There's the long sciatic nerve, and it branches off. There's a lot of clusters that branch off. You know, the Gid Anoshe, these branches off into smaller nerves. So those are the knuknis, those smaller nerves. So says Rab, lo aser teira ela knuknis. It's the knuknis that are taka aser. These branches of nerves that go into the meat and that are actually edible. You see, the Gid Anoshe itself. Now, I believe that when we talk about the Gid Anoshe itself, we're talking about by the kaf hayarich, right? Now, maybe I should have had the diagram, but I think we've seen it a few times already. That the Gid Anoshe goes by the. Take it out. You know, one second. Give me a second. I'm pulling up this. I'm going to pull up the diagram of the Gid Anoshe. I think it's going to be important. Give me a minute. I'm pulling it up. Okay, here we have a slide of the Gid Anoshe. So of course, the Gid Anoshe is the big nerve that starts all the way at the end of the spine and then goes all the way down the leg. So now you could see on the left side all those branches that branch out. Those are the knuknis. All those branches that branch off of the Gid Anoshe, those are the knuknis. So it says Rab that it's the knuknis that go into the meat because those are actually edible. They're small nerves in the meat. You can actually eat them. We're saying don't eat them. Now the actual Gid Anoshe, I believe that the actual technical sciatic nerve otherwise, as we said, al kaf hayarich, right? The very top arrow is pointing to a section of the sciatic nerve that's right by the kaf hayarich, right by the, what do we call it? The quadriceps femoris or something. those muscles that it goes right above the muscles by where the thigh bone and the hip socket meet. So that small little section there, I think, is technically the gid anoshe, by the kaf hayarich, but it's very hard. It's hard like wood, the Gemara says, and it doesn't have any taste. You can't eat it. You can't actually eat it. So Rav says that that's not, the Torah doesn't need to make usr something that's inedible. What the Torah is making usr is all those little knuknis that go into the meat. That is what is usr. So again, Amar Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta Amar Rav, lo usr Torah ela knuknis shabo, it's those knuknis, those branches. Ula Amar eitz hu v'Torah chayva alav. Ula says, I'm aware that small section of the gid anoshe by the kaf hayarich is hard like wood, but that nonetheless, the Torah, even though it's hard as wood and you can't actually eat it, that is still, in fact, whatever the Torah was mechayev you for. That's the gid anoshe. Abai kavasi the ula mistavro, and Abai says that it makes taka sense, like ula the Amar of Sheshes, Amar Rav Asi, because it says of Sheshes, Amar Rav Asi, chutin shebacheleb, the threads of cheleb. Now, threads are going to come up throughout this daf, threads of stuff. Now, threads could be threads of this or threads of that. It could be used in context of blood vessels too. They're just like kind of a generic term almost for like little strings of things, whether blood vessels, whether fats. Anyways, so chelev, when it comes to chelev of animals, where am I? So chutin shebechelev, the threads of the chelev asurin ve'ein chayav and olav. They're also midrabanan, but you aren't going to be chayav makis or karis for it, because the threads themselves are not actually chelev. So let's take a look for a second at what these threads are that we're talking about. So these are chelev threads, right? So there's some chelev, and you see all those like kind of thin kind of threads, right? Right, most of what you see here are these threads of chelev, but not like actual dense, solid chelev. These are chelev threads. And says Rav Sheshes Amar Rav Asi, chitin shebachelev, these chelev threads, asurin, you're not allowed to eat them midirabanon, ve'en chayav naleim, but you're not going to be chayav kares for eating them, because midoraisa, it doesn't apply to these threads. Alma chelev amar achmana, velo chutin. That means that when the Torah is talking about chelev, it's talking about actual solid chelev, it's not talking about chelev threads. So achanami, gid amar achmana velo knuknis, when the Torah talks about the gid anoshe, it's the gid itself. Even if it's hard and inedible, it's the gid that the Torah is talking about. At least midoraisa, it is not referring to the knuknis. Gufa, we just said, Amr Sheshes, Amr Rav Asi, chutin shebechelev, that when it comes to these threads of chelev, asurin, they are forbidden. Ve'en chayav and alein. However, even though they are forbidden, it's only midrabanan. You are not going to be chayav kares for eating them. Shebekulya, when it comes to a kidney, asurin, these threads are asurin ve'ein chayav nalein, and also you're not chayav for them as well, as we're going to see by kidneys in just a moment, that kidneys also have threads of chelev, and we say that just like we said by the chelev, you are not chayav for the threads, so also the chelev that's in the kidneys, you are not chayav for the threads. Fine. Loven kulya, the white of the kulya, Rebbe Reb Chia, it's machlokes Rebbe Reb Chia, chad osar, one says osar v'chad shari, one says it's permitted. Rabba mimartetla, Rabba would mamish go after the loven sheba kulya, and mamish get rid of every last bit of it, every trace of it. Rabbi Yochanan mimartetla, Rabbi Yochanan would also go after every last bit of the loven kulya. Rav Asi goyim le, Rav Asi would just kind of remove the outer part. Okay, I think it's time for us to look at some stuff. So, okay, here are these kidneys, okay? So, if you look at the right, so you got two kidneys, an open kidney, a kidney that's been opened up, and a closed kidney. Let's look at the opened up kidney. So, in the opened up kidney, so I added a red arrow, but there's also 3 black arrows on top. So the middle of the 3 black arrows is pointing right to the middle of the loven akulya. The loven akulya is inside of a kidney, there's this chaylev in the kidney, and my understanding is that it's not you don't want to eat it. It's not very nice to eat. I was watching, as we're going to see we're going to see soon, a screenshot from a master butcher that I found on YouTube, and so he was removing the kidneys from a lamb, and he cut them open and removed the chaylev that was inside. He said that the chaylev is not very nice to eat. He said in the supermarkets they don't take it out, but he takes it out, because that's why you go to a proper butcher. That's what he would argue. I don't eat meat. I'm not telling anybody what to do. Al koponim. So that middle black arrow is pointing to the loven akilia, the chaylev that's inside of the kidney. Now, the red arrow that I added is pointing to one of the threads, one of the webs, one of the sort of things that stick out, the threads of the chaylev. So okay, and let's look at one more thing, and then we'll read this over again. Now the charetz, if you look at the kidney on the left, so you'll see that there's some chaylev that sticks out from the kidney, right? So we said that Rab Asi would just remove that. He wouldn't remove the chaylev that's in the kidney, but he would just remove the part that's outside of the kidney. So let's read this again. Let's back up about 5-10 lines. I don't know where it says Gufa. Gufa Amar of Sheshis Amarav Asi Chutin Shebechelev, the threads in the chaylev Asurin. You're not allowed to eat them midirabanan vein chayiv alein, but midaraisa you're not going to be chayiv kares. Now Shebekulya, when we're talking about the chaylev of the kidneys, Asurin vein chayiv alein. Also, when we're talking about the threads of the chaylev of the kulya, right? So if you look at the diagram where I added a red arrow, where it's pointing to those threads that stick out from the main mass of chaylev inside of the kidney. So those threads, again, asurin ve'en chayav alein, they're also, but you won't be chayiv. You won't be chayiv mida oraisa for them. Now loven kulya, when we're talking about the actual chaylev in the kidney, Rebbe Rabchia, it's machlekes Rebbe Rabchia, chad osur, one of them says osur, the chad shari, the other one says it is mutter, as we're going to see in a minute why. Rabba mimarted la, so Rabba would mamish go after every last trace of the loven of this chaylev that's in the kidney. Rabbi Yochanan mimarted la, Rabbi Yochanan also would go after every last trace of it. Reb Asi go'im la, whereas Reb Asi, right, if you look at the kidney on the left, there's just that chaylev that's sticking out. Reb Asi would remove the chaylev that was visible, the chaylev that was sticking out, but he wouldn't necessarily he wouldn't go after anything that was in the kidney. Abai says Abai kavasa to Reb Asi mistavis says Abai, makes sense like Reb Asi that just remove the chaylev that's sticking out. To Amar Reb Abba, Amar Reb Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, chaylev sha'bosar chofe also, chaylev that is covered by meat, mutter is permitted. That chaylev that is surrounded by meat is permitted. Alma she'ala ksolim, Amar Achmana. Velosha b'socha ksolim. The Torah says on the flanks, not in the flanks. We'll see what that means in a second. Hachanami here also she'ala klayus Amar Achmana. The Torah says what's on the kidneys, i.e., what's sticking out of the kidneys. Velosha b'socha klayus, not what's in the klayus. So so Abaye says that it makes sense like Reb Asi, who just removed what was outside of the kidney, invisible, but whatever was inside the kidney, he said was permitted, because whatever is covered by meat, such as if it's inside of the kidney, so then there's not going to be an issue of chaylev. You can take a shluck of tea and we will continue discussing. Now, what did we say at the top line of the Gemara there? Again, top line of Tzadi Gimel Amud Aleph. Chaylev she'habosar chofe oso. Chaylev that is covered by meat. Now this is not the kidney, right? It says right after that, right? Hachanami she'ala klayos amar achmana v'zo b'socha klayos. We talk about the kidney separately. So what are we talking about here? We said she'ala ksolim amar achmana. On the flanks. What are we talking about? Okay. So here, I couldn't find a good photo of this in the Hillel book. So as I mentioned earlier, I was watching a quote-unquote master butcher. Apparently he's somewhere in England, a master butcher, and he's great. I mean, the videos are great. They're educational. And so what you see here is this master butcher. he's sawing off the flank of a lamb. And you see what he's holding in his hand that he's removed. So so he's holding in his hand, you can kind of see that there are like layers, right? You can see the skin on like by his thumb that he's holding onto it, that there's a skin. Underneath the skin, there's a layer of chalev. Underneath that, there is meat. Underneath that, there's more chalev. Underneath that, there's some meat. I believe underneath that, there's more chalev. So we see that there are kind of layers of meat and chalev, meat and chalev. So what we're saying is, right, chalev shabasar chofe also, this chalev that is being kind of sandwiched by meat, mutter, that chalev is mutter. Right, Amash alaksalim, Rachmana, that the chalev that's on the flank, so the chalev that would be not sandwiched in those layers of flank, but the chalev that's like mamish in the visible from the cavity of the lamb in this case. So that is right. That's what's asur. V'lo shebesoch aksalim, not the chalev that's with in the layers of the flank, in the meat chalev layers. Hachanami here as well by the kidney. Shalaklayos amrachmana v'lo shebesoch aklayos. We said that the chalev that is forbidden by kidneys is the chalev that is on the kidneys, not the chalev that is in the kidneys. Gufa, we said. Amar Reb Abba, Amar Reb Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Chalev she habasar chofe oso mutter. Okay, we just said that any chalev that is being covered by meat is mutter. Ini, is this true? Is this so? For Amar Reb Abba, Amar Reb Chia bar Abba. It says what? What? Amar Reb Abba, Amar Reb Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Hi, tarba de tuse masne. This chalev that is beneath the loins. Okay. Osir is osir. Amar Abai says, Abai behema b'chayeh parukim miparka. Well, Abai answers it by saying that an animal, when it's alive, it kind of moves around. What does that mean? So here's another photo. So kind of what you see here. So on the right side, the top label on the right side says loins, and it's a blue arrow pointing just below where my red arrow is. My red arrow is meant to be pointing to a layer of chalev that is just beneath the vertebrae, right? You see the vertebrae there in the middle, at the top in the middle. And then right beneath the vertebrae, my arrow is pointing to a layer of chalev. And then just beneath that, the arrow, the art scroll arrow, is pointing to a layer of meat that's called the loins. Now what can happen is, as the animal is moving around and walking around, so the meat can kind of move around. As the animal is moving, the meat can kind of move. And what can happen is that chalev can actually get exposed. And since it can get exposed, meaning the question is, how could it be that you'd be chayiv for that chalev? I thought chalev that is covered is mutter, and it looks like over here, right, this is chalev that isn't visible, right? There's meat covering it. However, we're saying that since as the animal walks and moves, the meat can move around exposing the chalev, so it could be considered exposed chalev, and that's why you're chayiv for it. So again, Gufa Amar Reb Abba Amar Reb Yehuda Amar Shmuel, chalev she habasar chofe also, chalev that's being covered by meat. Mutter is permitted. Ini, is that so? Ve'omar Reb Abba, Amar Reb Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Hai tarba de tuse masne, that this chalev that is by the loins, osir is osir. How could that be? It's covered by the loins. Amar Abai says, Abai behema b'chayah parukim miparka, that a behema as it's walking, it kind of moves around, thus exposing that chalev. The Amar Reb Yochanan says, Reb Yochanan, I'm not a butcher, nor am I the son of a butcher, which I don't think would actually matter, because I think his father died before he was born. But this is what we would say in the Beis HaMedrash, that an animal, as it moves around in life, it's meat and loins and stuff move around also, thus exposing that chalev. Chalev she'al hemsis, that chalev that's on the hemsis ubesakosis, asurin vanush karis. Okay, chelev that's on the hemsis and the besakosis. Of course, we know that in a animal that chews its cud, there are 4 stomachs. The first one is the keris, the second one is the besakosis, third is the hemsis, and finally the keva. So the chelev that's on the besakosis and the hemsis is mamish chelev yechayiv karis for eating it. V'zeu chelev she'al hakerev. That is what the Torah means when it says the chelev she'al hakerev. V'amar Reb Abba Amar Rav Yudah Mishmul haytarba de klibusta, the chelev that's by the klibusta also vanush karis is also in chayiv karis. V'zeu chelev she'al aksalim. This is the chelev she'al aksalim. So the klibusta here is a cow. The klibusta is the kind of the last bone in the vertebrae, which is kind of made up of a few bones merged together. So chelev in that area that's beneath that klibusta bone would be considered, what do we say? We said haytarba de klibusta aser. It's also vanush karis. You mechayev karis for eating that chelev that's around there. We said that's the chelev she'al aksalim. Okay, fine. V'amar Babble, Amar Rav Yudah, Amar Shmuel, chutin shebiyad asurin. That the chutin, we have to define what those chutin are, but the chutin that are in the forearm of the animal are asur. Amar Rav Safra says to Reb Abba, Moshe. Rav Safra calls Reb Abba Moshe, because Moshe, as Rashi says, means Talmud Chacham. We saw this in Masechta Shabbos, I think, that sometimes the Amoraim would call each other Moshe. Rav Nachman Breslov, he has in Likutei Moharan, I think it was the first time that I saw that he says that tzaddikim, you can call it Moshe, tzaddikim are referred to as Moshe, as we see, Moshe Shapir Kamar. Anyways, it says, Rav Safra to Rav Abba Moshe, Mi Omar, Rachmane lo seicho bisra. So Rav Safra doesn't understand. He thinks that what Rav Abba is saying is that in the foreleg there are these 5 threads, and that Rav Abba is saying that they are chelev, and therefore you can't eat any of these threads. It says, Rav Safra, he says, you're basically saying you can't eat meat. They're not chelev, they're shuman, they're fat, you can eat them. Omer le Rava, so Rava says to Rav Safra, Moshe, refers to Rav Safra as Moshe. Mi Omer Achmano echol dama. The Torah is not telling you to eat blood. You're not allowed to eat blood. What Rava is saying to Rav Safra is that the issue with these chutin is not that they're chelev. The issue with these chutin is that they're blood vessels. There are 5 blood vessels in the foreleg. And these 5 blood vessels need to be dealt with. And nishgeferlach. Chatre umalche, afil l'gdera nami shapir dami. Nishgeferlach. Cut into these blood vessels to open them up, and then salt them properly. I believe the main sugya of salting is going to be in another few weeks. But today we're saying, I think this is the first time that I can recall us talking about salting meat. But cut open the blood vessels so that the blood has a way to leave the blood vessels, and then salt the meat. And then afilu likidera nami shapir dami. What does it mean, afilu likidera? What it means is that, you see, when it comes to blood, any blood that is extracted from the meat, the pasuk says, the Torah says, you're not allowed to eat blood. What about blood that is absorbed in the meat itself? The meat itself contains blood. That blood, at least midoraisa, would be okay. Blood contained in the meat. But blood that is extracted from the meat, whether by shechita or any other method, if it's extracted from the meat, so then it's also midoraisa. So if you're going to be, let's say, roasting meat, and roasting meat is one of the ways of koshering meat, right, removing the blood from it. So if you're going to roast meat, so then as you roast it, the blood is drawn out and it falls on the fire. If you boil meat, so then any blood that's in the meat may be extracted into the water, and once it's extracted into the water, it becomes usur because it was extracted from the meat. But because it's boiling in the water, it'll be reabsorbed into the meat, making the meat usur. So what Rava is saying, if however you cut open these vessels and salt the meat properly, then you can even boil it and it won't be an issue. It'll be completely kosher. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Reish Me'aya be'amsa ba'igrira. The Reish Me'aya, I don't have a slide for this. We've seen this before. Basically, as I just mentioned a few minutes ago, of course, in the digestive tract of a animal that chews its cud, there are 4 stomachs. After the 4 stomachs, there is something that's called the Reish Me'aya. And what Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel is saying, that you have to remove an amah's worth of chaylev from the Reish Me'aya, that is asur fat. V'zeu chaylev she'al hadakin, this is what's called the chaylev she'al hadakin. V'amar Rav Yehuda, says Rav Yehuda, chutin shebe'okitz asurin, that the chutin coming from the thigh bone are asur, and Rashi, I believe, understands it to continue and saying, chamisha chute izbe, that there are 5 such chutim bekafla in the flanks. So these are 5 threads that go into the flanks, I guess in the area of the thigh bone. Tlasa miyamina v'taite mismala. There are 5 of these threads, 3 on the right side, 2 on the left side. Tlasa mifatzle letrei trei. The 3 threads, they branch into 2 branches each. Trei and the 2 threads, mifatzle letlasa, they branch into 3 branches each. So basically you have 3 times 2 and 2 times 3, 6 branches on each side. Nafkamine, now what's the nafkamine of knowing about how many there are and how many branches? The ishalif lihu adchamime mishtalfe. Well, if you are going to remove the hip bone immediately after you shech the animal, and with it will come these nerves. Well, I think these are chaylev. So, and with them will come these threads. So they'll all, as long as if the meat is still warm and things are going to be removed easily, you don't have to worry too much. But if you don't immediately remove them, by chatute basrai, you're going to have to dig for them. And you have to know how many there are. So we're saying that there are 5, and then divide into 3 and 2. 2 times 3, 3 times 2. Okay, anyways. On my Abai says, Abai b'temer of Yehuda, Chamsha chute havu. We're going to discuss now 5 chutim. Tlasa mishum tarba. 3 of them are chaylev. V'trein mishum dama, and 2 of them are blood vessels. V'tachle v'dekafle v'dekulyasa. The chutin in the spleen, the flanks, and the kidneys, mishum tarba, they are chaylev. Diyada v'dilua, but the chutim in the forearm and in the cheek, in the jaw, mishum dama, they are blood vessels. L'may nafkamina, what's a nafkamina? Hane de mishum dama I michatechlu umalachlu shapir dami. Well, the ones that are blood vessels, you can cut them open and salt them, and then you solve the problem of the blood. Hanach leislu takanta. But the ones that are chaylev, there's nothing you can do about it. Amar of Kahana, v'temer of Yehuda, chamsha karme havu. There are 5 membranes. Tlasa mishum tarba, betrei mishum dama. 3 of them are chaylev, and 2 of them are blood. The tachle, the kafle, v'dichulyasa. The membranes of the spleen, of the flanks, of the kidneys, mishum tarba, they are chaylev. The be'e v'demukra, testicles and brains, mishum dama, they are blood concerns. Rav Yehuda bar Oshaya have a kolifle tachla lelevi bre Rav Huna bar Chia. Rav Yehuda bar Oshaya was once peeling the membrane from a spleen for Levi, right? Because we just said that the membrane of the spleen is chaylev. So Rav Yehuda bar Oshaya was peeling away the membrane of a spleen, the Levi bread of Yehuda, bread of Huna bar Chia, for Levi bread of Huna bar Chia, goim leme Eloi. And Rav Yehuda bar Oshaya was peeling and removing the membrane from the top, thicker part of the spleen. And Levi requested that he also remove the membrane from the lower part of the spleen, the thinner part of the spleen. Also, Avua, and Levi's father came in and he saw Ashkeche Amar Le, and he says, Hachyamer Avua de Imach, that your grandfather, your mother's father, said Mishum Durav, in the name of Rabbi Manu, who's your grandfather? Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba. Lo Asr Torah Ella Sha'al Adad Bilvad. The only part that's also midoraisa is the part in the upper, thicker part of the spleen where it connects to the spleen connects to, I believe the spleen connects to the, does it connect to the, I think it connects to the, I think in the thicker part, I think is where it connects to the Oseres HaKavod, to the diaphragm. But anyways, it connects to cheleb parts, right? So there are these blood vessels that enter into the spleen, and right, where it's connected to, I think the Oseres HaKavod, and it's also connected to, there's a lot of cheleb in those parts. By the right, the other end I think is connected to the keres, to the stomach, and there's Asr cheleb. Anyways, so it's those parts that the membrane needs to be removed from because we're concerned about cheleb. But you don't have to be concerned about the thinner parts because those aren't actually connected to anything. Ini, is that really so? Says Levi to his father. Va'amar Rav Amnuna Tana Krum Sha'al Atchol, that we learn in a brayso that the membrane on the spleen, Asr, it's entirely Asr. Ve'en chayav ma'alav, but you are not chayav. Ayi, it's Asr midirabanan. Heichidami, what part of the membrane of the spleen is only also midirabanan? Ile mishal hadad, if it's the upper, thicker part of the spleen, amai ein chayav alav. Why would you not be chayav midoraisa? Because after all, we said that there's a concern about chaylev there. Ela dechule, rather, it's talking about the rest of the spleen is asr midirabanan, and therefore, Levi explains that is why he was requesting that the membrane be removed from the entire spleen, because even the thinner part is also asr midirabanan. Amalei itanya tanya. His father says, "Look, you just brought a raya from a brisa. If it's in a brisa, it's in a brisa. I can't argue with the brisa. Gufa, we said earlier. Rav Amnuna says Rav Amnuna Tana Krum She'al Atchol, that this membrane on the spleen asr. It is asr ve'en chayav and olav, but you are not chayav for it. It's only also midirabanan. Krum she'al gabe kulya, and I guess the brisa continues that the membrane on the kidneys asr is also asr ve'en chayav and olav, but it's only also midirabanan. You're not chayav midiraisa ve'atanya chayav and olav, but we learn in the brisa that you're chayav for the membrane on the spleen. You're chayav for the membrane on the kidneys. Tchol atchol lo kasha, so there's no issue in terms of the spleen. Ha keneged adad, chilo keneged adad. If it's the upper part of the spleen, so then it's asr midiraisa. If it is the lower part of the spleen, the thinner part of the spleen, it's only asr midirabanan. Akulya nami lo kasha, and also when it comes to kidneys, it's no problem. Ha be'ilah, ha betata. It depends if we're talking about the upper membrane or the lower membrane. Here I have a photo of a kidney, and you could see basically the kidney is surrounded in cheleb. So the left arrow, right, the bottom left arrow, kind of halfway through the photo, so that is pointing to the membrane directly on the kidney itself. And that membrane is only also midirabanan. Now, if you go to the top arrows, the very top arrow is pointing to a membrane on the cheleb itself. That membrane is actually considered actual cheleb, and that's going to be also midirabanan. The membrane on the kidney itself, not on the cheleb, I'm sorry, I don't know what I just said. The membrane on the cheleb itself is also midiraisa as cheleb, chayiv kares. And the membrane on the kidney, though, directly on the kidney, that is only also midirabanan. Be'ei chashilta. I am going to take a shluck of tea while you think about what Bei Chashilta might be. The more uncomfortable you think it might be, the closer you might be. Okay, so what are Bei Chashilta? Bei Chashilta are testicles that the connection from the testicle to the scrotum, whatever that is that connects them, was kind of severed, but dangling on by a thread. Rav Ami, Rav Asi, Chad Omer, Chad Osir, Chad Shari. Machlekes Rav Ami and Rav Asi, what happens in that case? One says Osir, one says Mutter. Man the Osir, the one who says Osir, Midilo kabarian, since the testicle has been severed enough that it's not going to heal. So hane aver minachai ninu. So these testicles are considered aver min achai. Now Tosfos points out it's not actual aver min achai because it is still actually connected to the animal, but it's kind of like a basar amidul dolin. If you remember, that was a difficult sugya we learned about a few weeks ago, that if you shech the animal, it won't be nevela, it won't be considered like aver min achai, but you also would not be able to eat it. Mandashari, the opinion who says that it is permitted, midelo ma kamasruchon hane chayusa isbu, from the fact that these testicles are not becoming becoming like diseased or whatever. So clearly they are still connected and receiving life from the body. Ve'idach Hi delo ka masruchan. The reason why they don't get problematic is delo ka shalit bu avir, because they're covered. They're inside the body. They haven't been exposed to the elements, so therefore the body is keeping them, preventing them from becoming. How do you define masruchan? Like rancid? I don't know. Ve'idach hi delo baryan. The reason why they aren't healing. Right, the opinion who says that it's aver min achai, the one who says that it is not aver min achai, that is permitted. So the only reason why they aren't healing is chishusa hu did not got It's because they are weak, right? They're only dangling on by a thread. Okay, fine. Amalei of Yochanan le Rav Shemin bar Abba says Rav Yochanan Rav Shemin bar Abba hane be'e chashilta. When it comes to these uncomfortable testicles, Sharion, they are permitted. Ve'i, right, they're not going to be considered also because of Ever ben Achai. Ve'at, however, you, Rav Shemin Marabba, lo techo, you can't eat them, mishum, v'atitosh Torah simecha, do not abandon the Torah of your mother, i.e., since you come from Babel and Rav Ami and Rav Asi, not Rab Ami and Reb Asi, but Rav Ami and Rav Asi were in Babel, and therefore there's this machlokas about whether or not you can eat these beitze, these bei dechushilta. So that's a machlokas in Babel. So even though, says Rabbi Yochanan, we hold that it's mutter, because you're from Babel, you can't eat these be'e dechushilta. Ravashi, hani be'e degadia, testicles of a goat. Atlas and Yomin, if the goat is less than 30 days old, sharion below klifa, you can eat the testicles, you don't need to peel them first. Mikan ve'elach, but from 30 days and on, azra'an asurin below azra'an sharion. If they have seed in them already, so then they are asur. If they don't yet have seed, then they're mutaminu adinan. How do we know if there's what kind of indication is there if they have seed in them or not? Isbu shuraike sumke. If they have red streaks on them, asiran, they are asur. Leisbu shuraike sumke. If they don't have red streaks on them, sharion, they are permitted. Umse beye umizurke, raw meat, testicles, and neck veins, neck blood vessels. Pligi ba Rav Acha v'Ravina, machlekes Rav Acha and Ravina, and b'chol ha'Torah kula, as we know that throughout the Torah, Ravina lekula Rav Acha lechuma, when there's a machlekes Ravina and Rav Acha, the more lenient opinion will be Ravina's, and the more stringent opinion will be Rav Acha's. V'ilchas like Ravina lekula, and we consistently pass in like Ravina to be mekil. Levar me'anik plus, but in these three scenarios that we just mentioned, umtse bei umizuke, the Rav Acha lekula Ravina lechuma. It's Rav Acha who's being lenient, and Ravina is being stringent. Ve'ilchas like Rav Acha lekula, and the halachas like Rav Acha who's being lenient. Umtsa, when we're talking about raw meat, the asmik, that it's saturated, it's very bloody. Chatcha umalcha, so you can just cut it up and then salt it. Cut it up really well and salt it. I feel like there nami shapir dami, as we said earlier. Right, this would also be an example where once you salt it properly, you can even boil it, and it would be no concern about blood. Talia nami b'shipuda da'iv dama. Also, if you take this very bloody meat and you put it on a skewer and put that skewer in an oven and let it cook in the oven and let the blood flow out and drip out into the oven, that's also acceptable. Gumre. What if you take this meat and just put it directly on coals? Well, this is machlekes. Pligi bar Rav Acha Ravina Chad Omar Mishav Sheive. One opinion is that no problem, the blood will be drawn out via the coals. V'chad Omar Matzmas Tzamse Mitzamas Tzamsele. The other opinion is that no, the coals are going to cause the meat to sear and hold in and keep in the blood, and therefore it would be usher. And we said that the more lenient opinion would be Rav Acha, and we paskin that way that putting it on coals would have the effect of removing and drawing out the blood. And all of these halachas apply to testicles, where you have to be concerned about the outer membrane, and mizuke, these blood vessels in the neck. If you cut them open and salt them or put them in an oven, etc., it would remove the blood that needs to be removed. Reisha kivsha, if you take the head of a cow, let's say, and you rinse it off and put it in hot ash for the blood to be able to come out, for the blood to be able to come out and to be able to remove the hair that's on the head. So osve abes ashchita, if you put it into the hot ash with the beis ashchita where it was shechted down, facing downwards, so da'iv dama, so any blood from the brain, the concern is that the membrane of the brain contains a lot of blood, so that blood will be able to flow out by way of the neck, the beis ashchita, v'shari, and it's permitted. At stadin, if you lie it on its side, however, mikba kafi, the blood is just going to congeal and ve'aser. Osve anachive, if you prop it up on its nose, on its nostrils, dotzbe midi shari, if you put something in the nostrils to keep the airways open so that the blood can flow out of them, so then shari is permitted. V'ilo, but if you didn't do that, then aser, because the blood's not going to be able to leave. Those who say whether you put the head on its nostrils or prop it up on its nostrils or on the beis hashchita or shechted doiv, the blood will flow out at stadin. But if you put it on its side, idatzbe midi shari v'ilo aser. If you make some kind of an opening for the blood to be able to leave, so then it's permitted. But if you don't make an opening for it, so then it will be also because it's on its side and the blood's just going to congeal. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Shnei Gidin Hein, as we saw the other day, that there are two Gidanoshes, right? The main Gidanosha and the secondary Gidanosha. Apnimi Samach Le'etzem, the inner one is closer to the bone, Osir, and it is also v'chayiv, and you can be chayiv makis if you eat it. Chitzon, the outer one, Samach Lebasar, is close to or really in the meat, in the, what did we call it? The I can't remember. I remembered it before. The quadra something femoris or something. So also that one is also bein chayiv and Allah, but you're not going to be chayiv makis for that secondary gid anosh v'atana. But don't we learn in the brayse pnimi samach lebasar, that the inner one that is closer to, that is the inner one is closer to the meat, not the bone. Amar Rav Acha, Amar Rav Kahana, iklude miklid. We're saying that it's closer to the meat because the gid anoshe, while it is not, when it's passing over the kafa yarech, it is not in the meat, but then it ultimately does enter into the meat with all of its knukness and stuff. But don't we say about the chitzon, not that it's similar, close to the meat, but that it's close to the bone? When we say it's close to the bone, it's talking about when the butchers cut the leg by the joint where the thigh and the shok and the yarech meet, so there, where the yarech and the hip bone meet, so there the secondary gidanosha is close to that section over there when you separate the yarech from the hip bone. Itmar, and that's what it means that it's close to the bone. There it's close to the bone. Itmar, we said taboch shenimtza chelev acharav, that if you have a butcher and the butcher is responsible for making sure that there's no chelev on his products, and you find that there is chelev, that people are buying products, he's doing a sloppy job, and there's chelev on the products. Rav Yehuda Amar Bekisaora, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Bekizayis. Rav Yehuda says if we're talking about a barley size amount of chelev, Rabbi Yochanan says a kazayis amount of chelev. Amar Papis, Papav Lo Plige, they agree, they don't argue. Kan al koso, kan the avro, it depends. To get makis, that's a bigger deal. So if there's a kazayis of chelev, you can get makis for that. But if just in terms of if he's unreliable and we're going to force him to close down his business, that's even for a barley's amount. Amar Marzutra says Marzutra kiseora b'makom echad, that when we're talking about a seora, it means in one place. So there's two ways to understand this. One way to understand it is that he's talking about Rav Yehuda's shita, that when Rav Yehuda says a kiseora to make him close down his business, it's talking about a barley's amount in one place. Kazayas afilu bebeis v'gimel mekomas. And if we're talking about a kazayas, so even if it's so if you don't have, necessarily either a seora's worth of chelev in one place, or smaller amounts of chelev that spread out, in several locations that add up to a kazayas. Alternatively, you can be giving a different explanation of the machlokas, right? You could be arguing with Rav Papa and saying that when Rav Yehuda says seora and Rabbi Yochanan says a kazayas, Rabbi Yehuda is talking about in one place, and Rabbi Yochanan is talking about in multiple places. Right, so according to this version, whether we're talking about getting lashes or forcing him to remove his job, Rabbi Yehuda would be saying that there has to be a barley's amount in one place, whereas Rabbi Yochanan says that even if there's lesser amounts, but they add up to a kazayas, that he would be chayv as well. That for him to get makis, if he leaves a kazayas worth of chelev, so he'll get makis. If it's a barley's amount, so then we're going to force him to close his business. We can't trust him to be removing chelev, which is a chiyuv kares, and he can't be trusted. The Mishnah had said that according to Reb Meir, we cannot rely upon butchers to be removing the gid anosha. It's a very tedious task to remove the gid anosha, and says Reb Meir, we cannot rely upon the butchers to be properly removing the gid anosha. The Chacham said we can rely upon the butchers to remove the gid anosha. Initially, they held, like Reb Meir, that you can't rely upon the butchers by the gid anosha, but then they changed to say, you know what, we can rely upon the butchers to properly remove the gid anosha. Rav Nachman, Achshur Dare, Rav Nachman says, I don't understand. Usually, things work in the opposite directions. In the olden days, we were able to trust. Now we can no longer trust people, right? Usually it worked in that direction. We lose trust in people. Why all of a sudden we saying that they changed their mind to say, okay, we can actually now we could trust. We used to not be able to trust the butchers. Now we could trust them. So Meikara de Havu Savrila Reb Meir Love Memni. No, it's more subtle than that. Initially we paskin like Reb Meir. What does that mean? Well, I think maybe we saw yesterday that Reb Meir's shita is that you mamish need to, if you're removing the gid anosha, it's a major piece of work. It's a major job. You're removing the gid anosha and all the knuknis, with all the knuknis as well. That's a major job. Now we saw yesterday the shita of Rabbi Yehuda that any of the knuknis that are in the meat, those are actually okay. You really just need to remove the gid anosha that is al kafayarich. Just remove that. That's easy. And we said also just any outer fats, remove that as well. But that's much easier. So initially they paskin like Reb Meir. And since they paskin like Reb Meir, so you couldn't rely upon the butchers to be doing such a tedious task reliably and consistently. But once they changed to hold like Reb Yehuda instead, where it was much easier, it was a much less significant job. So now we can rely, for that practical consideration, we can rely upon the butchers now. So and in the end, Sabri Rabbi Yehuda, they said we all like Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore we can rely upon the butchers at that point. Once we hold like Rabbi Yehuda. To those who say that this is going on the Chachamim's shita, that you can rely upon the butchers to remove the gid anosha and to be removing chelev. That, however, then they said you can't rely upon the butchers to remove the gid anosha. But nowadays we can rely upon the butchers. I don't understand. If in earlier generations we said that you could have, right? Meaning initially, we said you could rely upon the butchers, but then we're saying then they changed their mind to say you can't rely upon the butchers. And Nachman's saying that now you can rely upon the butchers. What, like, have things gotten better? Have the generations gotten better? Meikara Savrua Rabbi Yehuda. No, this is what happens. Initially, they held like Rabbi Yehuda. And because they held like Rabbi Yehuda, they said we can rely upon the butchers because it's an easier job. Hadar Savrua Rabbi Meir, but then they changed to hold like Rabbi Meir, which made it a much more significant job. And and there was a transition period where, they used to hold like Rabbi Yehuda, which was a much easier job. Then when they changed to hold like Rabbi Meir, which is a much more significant job, they had to go through this transition period where you couldn't rely upon butchers because it wasn't fully, there's a transition period where, you're going from all the butchers holding one way to now them all having to hold a new way. There was kind of a period where you couldn't necessarily be 100% sure that things were going to be, that maybe all the butchers knew, maybe some of the butchers remembered the halacha when it was Rabbi Yehuda and they were only removing that part of the Gid Anoshe. However, V'hashta, what Rav Nachman is saying, that by now already, the Anshua le Rabbi Yehuda, nobody remembers that we ever held like Rabbi Yehuda. Everybody assumes that it's like Rabbi Meir, Memning. Now, once it's already been accepted, and nobody even remembers the fact that once upon a time, we passing like Rabbi Yehuda, that there's a much smaller Gid Anoshe. No. Now that everybody knows that it's like Reb Meir, that if you're going to be removing the Gid Anoshe, it's a major piece of work. So now once everybody knows that, if the butcher says that he did the work, well, you could trust that he did the work. And the Chacham had said in the Mishnah that butchers are trusted that they remove the chelev as well. Chelev man dechar shmei. Who said anything about chelev? We're talking about the Gid Anoshe. Hachi ka'amar ein ne'eman olav ve'ala chelev. Reb Meir is saying that we cannot trust butchers to remove the Gid Anoshe nor to remove the chelev. The Chacham respond, they say no, the butchers are believed regarding the Gid Anoshe as well as chelev. Wow, sheesh, that was like a bit of an overwhelming daf. I feel like I haven't had a daf like that in a while where I was just like there's a lot of like very technical just stuff, lots of stuff to like, things that we had to look at and slides and stuff. But anyways, we hopped through like a million kind of sugyas there, probably very important sugyas, but like it was kind of hard to get. It feels like you can really get into the weeds for like each one of these things. It feels like we even got into the weeds enough already today, but we learned all about kind of different kinds of chelevs and different considerations you have for blood and removing and to salt the blood and to roast blood and to be able to remove blood this way or remove blood that way and all sorts of things like that. Friends, that was the Tzadi Gimel of Masechta Chullin. Hope you enjoyed it. I will catch you tomorrow. Have a great day. Cheers.